Thank you for joining us for another episode of Treasury Talks. I am your host and your Delaware State Treasurer, Colleen Davis, and I am so pleased to have with me today Treasurer Goldberg, who is from the great state of Massachusetts. Treasurer Goldberg, can you start us off by just sharing a little bit of your background and how you came to serve?
Oh boy, how do you have all day? Well, to try to summarize it, I wouldn't be treasurer at all if my family and I had not gone through a hostile takeover of a company that my family founded a couple of generations ago. I would be chairman of the board of a large New York Stock Exchange company today. However, what was unique about our company is we believed that democracy and capitalism were America's version of socialism. And so we created a company in the early part of the 1900s that employed multiple generations of families at the same time, brought in the unions ourselves, gave 100% health insurance, not just for full-timers, but part-timers. And people had solid jobs and economic stability and economic opportunity. And so I was brought up to carry on that legacy. And so when that went through a hostile takeover, it was a natural progression for me to turn to public service. And I originally ran for local office. But I was driven by the desire and almost need to make sure that I could positively impact people's lives. We had 50,000 employees. When we went through the hostile takeover, and it was a Wall Street firm bankrupted half the company by loading all the debt onto it and then fired our people. So I've been at that work for a long time now, and I love all that I do. And we're making a difference, a huge difference.
You talk about sort of making a difference in the private sector. And then when you're met with this huge obstacle that is really, you cannot overcome it in this hostile takeover, you pivot and you move to doing something else that you remain passionate about, which is the same thing and in empowering people. It's really phenomenal, and it's an amazing story.
Well, my father and mother, my mother is one of the top 10 businesswomen in America in the 1970s. And the head of this investment bank, who will go nameless now, brought them into his office and told them what they were going to do. We are of the Jewish faith. My father quoted from the Talmud, which are our learned treaties about the ethics of our fathers. And my mother turned to him and said, "We will not," and the meeting is over. They were fired and gave him 24 hours to get out. True story, no exaggeration.
Wow.
Those are my values. That's who I am.
Well, precisely. I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that, you remain true to your core. And, when you're making those types of statements, and then the decision, that's founded on the same sort of principle. You start to see the parallels between our offices and between private sector work and what we are doing and the ways that we serve. Although I will say that there's, we always sort of say this, that no two state treasurers are alike. And I'd love it if you could share a little bit about some of the unknown or some of the lesser known or interesting facts about your office and about some of the things that you do inside of Treasury for the state of Massachusetts.
So we have some of the more traditional areas, such as debt management and cash management and unclaimed property, the pension fund, the retirement board. However, we have some very unique parts. And what I love about our treasurer's office, and candidly, it's one of the more complicated ones in the country, because 13 departments are under my office. We have 800 employees. And so we have the Massachusetts State Lottery, which is an operating company, an over $5 billion operating company, which sends back, its profits are the only source of unrestricted local aid for all 351 local communities. And that's what its mission is. And so that lottery, I don't think there's any other treasurer that has the lottery. I have the Alcoholics Beverages Control Commission under the treasurer's office. And in fact, we have been part of the COVID enforcement team to try to keep people from gathering in groups, maskless, drinking excessively, and making everybody sick. And then we have the Massachusetts School Building Authority, where we partner with all 351 communities, and we support them both through bonding and resources in renovating or building new schools in every community. We get a penny from the sales tax, which we leverage for our bonding. We have the Clean Water Trust, where we use a revolving fund and then bond in order to give 0% or small loans to local communities to both rebuild their infrastructure, and we've tested the water in all the schools, and now we are replacing water programs in the schools with bottled water stations. So that's a wide array. And then, of course, to get back to my roots, when I arrived, I created the Office of Economic Empowerment, which at the time was the first of its kind in the country and still is very unique for what it does. It originally started off where we were attacking wage inequality and the wage gap by starting by auditing all jobs and all salaries of all 800 of my own employees before stepping out and teaching others how to do this. We have a website, equalpayma.com. We convened 32 people in the private sector and in the public sector and in academia, and did a financial literacy task force that came back with 22 recommendations within 6 months, and we enacted every one of them. You can go to myfinanciallife.org. And we also did a pilot that ended last January when we kicked off our Baby Steps College Savings Program. Actually, it's our Baby Steps Savings Program because it's not just for college, it's for vocational and technical training, where we seed, my office seeds, the accounts for every baby born or adopted in Massachusetts, and we wrap financial literacy services around them and their families. That's just 3 of our programs. I could go on. Senior workshops, high school students, you name it, it's to help people access the skills they need to not only survive, but to understand the financial ramifications of their decision-making, help keep people out of debt, create economic stability. And so it's a very, very exciting part of my office.
I love that, because you touched on several things. You know, you touched on seeking to empower your own staff and other state employees, which I think is huge. But you also touched on trying to help empower families and sort of all people across Massachusetts. One of the things that I think that really speaks to is kind of those roots that you talked about, where you're not only looking to empower people, but you've created a family. You know, you've created a family within your own office, within Treasury, but you're also helping people to create that same sort of connectivity everywhere, which I think was really needed this year, of course. And I think that it's why we've remained so strong with your leadership as the president of the National Association of State Treasurers. I can tell you that going through the pandemic, it was extremely helpful to rely on each other, and you implemented that. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
So what's interesting is when it was, believe it or not, my mother's great grandmother who first started our business. So her philosophy was that every friend or relative who arrived from the old countries had a roof over their heads and a job. So everybody was family. Stop and Shop, everybody was family. Everyone who works for me is family. And so that would naturally translate over to NASS. So what does a mom like me do and a leader like me do in a pandemic? I want to make sure I keep everyone together, communicating, being there for each other, supporting each other in this vast unknown. And that's whether it's in a business setting or whether it is my own employees, where we have continuously had all Treasury Zooms doing things such as our monthly diversity celebrations, where we celebrate a different ethnic group, a different culture, a different religion monthly. And we have guest speakers and we have questions and answers. When we did them in person, we also were able to have the foods. So we missed that part, but we did an ice cream social. So we sent out boxes of ice cream to everybody. And I had it on the table next to me and I would hold up the hot fudge, because when we had them in person, they all laughed because I would take a giant ladle and ladle the ice cream the fudge, and drink it right out of the ladle. So I had to do that even on Zoom. And I send messages out via video to keep morale going, to encourage people to reach out to their bosses or to HR. I have a very empowered HR department. I consider it a leader and an HR department's job to make sure that everybody's okay. And that I think even on the wage issues, it's up to the HR department to make sure that if somebody doesn't know how to advocate for themselves and ask for the salary they believe that they deserve, even in the hiring process, because there are groups of people who tend to not ask, and they are women and people of color. And that's how the gap has grown and grown. It's our HR's department to assure that everyone is paid the same and everybody's paid what they're worth. And our HR department is fantastic. So yes, I brought that to NAST. I feel that we, as you recall, we had weekly phone calls. We had events. I think the Ben Bernanke event, where he met with all of us, was terrific. I was able, with Sean Snyder from NAST, who's the executive director, to do a lot of being able to advocate a great deal on the part of all of our states. And we developed a cohesive plan, because the federal government at times can divide and conquer, but they can't do it with the treasurers, and certainly not with me around.
Well, and we all felt the benefit of that leadership. I mean, it helped us to serve our constituents. And so in a way, you helped every treasurer to serve better. So I think that, that sort of, we felt cared for in a family sort of way, and advocated for, and at the same time could then in turn do our jobs better.
I will tell you, I drove Sean Snyder crazy because I made him available to me 24/7. Hey, Colleen, you have kids. What do moms do? You don't have a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule. You work 24/7 and you balance all of the balls in the air, correct?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. from the perspective of NAST, we talk about a little bit. One of the topics that's sort of up and coming right now is retirement readiness and security. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how different states are kind of stepping into this space and what that need is, and maybe what you all have done. Specifically, I'm thinking about, the impact on certain groups of our constituents, women, people of color, that type of thing.
So although there's a lot of initiative around auto IRAs, we chose several years ago to go a different route and created our own plan that we call the CORE plan. And we thought that the benefit of that, and we believe it, and we continue to believe it today, is that employers can contribute to this plan. And we worked with Department of Labor for a long time. Tom Perez was the head of it then. And we were able to take care of all of the sticky issues of implementing a state-run retirement savings plan that was a multi-employer, where it wasn't just an auto IRA, which has limitations. And so once we developed that plan, to say that the private industry wasn't thrilled because we were going to be a very low cost plan for employers as opposed to typical private plans, there was some resistance at the State House. And so the compromise position, unfortunately, was that we wanted to offer it to every nonprofit. The nonprofit world in Massachusetts has almost 600,000 employees. They are mainly women, a lot of people of color, people who typically experience a wage gap, and in the nonprofit world are opting for lower salaries anyway because they do good. And so we, the ultimate limitation at the State House was 20 employees or less. And that was a real shame and a clear crime when a nonprofit with 21 people came in and wanted to sign up, and we had to turn them away. And I've used that in testimony at the State House. And so what we have found is over 75% of the people who have signed up are contributing to their employees' plans. And so it is a success. We even received from Pensions and Investment an innovation award. However, we have been filing legislation to lift the cap.
You touched on it as well. It's just, there's a true cost for doing nothing. And so it's really amazing and remarkable that you were able to achieve this and get so much coverage for so many folks that are typically earning on the lower end of their professional spectrum. And I think it'll go a long way. Absolutely, already is going a long way. I think one of the most amazing things about your bend, right, is that you have an eye for what makes sense in the business world and what makes sense for a family, right? So sort of that common sense balance that I think most treasurers carry and try to sort of emulate. And so it's really been phenomenal to watch you lead NAST. It's been phenomenal to know you, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to just share some of the things that you've done. And this is, keep in mind, a very small snippet of some of the things that you've done. And I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Colleen, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You've made my day.